May 1955. Behind the Pavilion in Florida. Two teenage boys, Larry Silva and his friend, crouched behind a building, desperately trying to figure out how to sneak into the Elvis Presley and Hank Snow concert. They had no money, not a single dollar between them, but they needed to see Elvis perform. Everyone was talking about this new singer who was setting the South on fire with his music. Then a limousine pulled up behind them. The door opened, and out stepped Elvis Presley himself. The teenagers froze. They'd just been caught trying to sneak into his concert. Elvis looked at them and asked one simple question. "What are you boys doing?" What happened next, what Elvis said and did in that moment, would stay with those teenagers for the rest of their lives. Over 50 years later, they would still tell this story with tears in their eyes, remembering the day Elvis Presley proved he was more than just a performer. He was someone who understood what it meant to be broke, desperate, and willing to do anything just to hear music that spoke to your soul. It was May 1955 in Florida. Elvis Presley was still in the early days of his career, touring the South with country music legend Hank Snow. These weren't the massive stadium shows Elvis would later perform. These were smaller venues, local auditoriums, places where a ticket might cost a few dollars. But for Larry Silva and his friend, even a few dollars might as well have been $1 million. They were teenagers, working-class kids, the kind who counted pennies and dreamed big dreams. And their biggest dream that spring was to see Elvis Presley perform live. "We have to get in there," Larry told his friend as they stood outside the pavilion that afternoon. "Everyone who's seen him says he's incredible. This might be our only chance." "But we don't have any money," his friend reminded him. "I know, but there's got to be a way." They'd heard stories about Elvis, about this young singer from Mississippi who moved like nothing anyone had ever seen before, who sang with a voice that mixed country and blues and gospel into something completely new, who made girls scream and parents worry and teenagers feel like someone finally understood them. Larry and his friend had scraped together every penny they could find, but it wasn't enough. Not even close. The tickets were sold out anyway. Even if they'd had the money, they couldn't get in through the front door. So they did what desperate teenagers do. They came up with a plan to sneak in. "We'll go around back," Larry suggested. "There's got to be a back entrance, loading dock, something. We'll wait until nobody's looking and slip inside." His friend nodded. It wasn't a great plan, but it was the only plan they had. They spent the afternoon scouting the building, looking for weak spots in security, timing when doors opened and closed. They felt like criminals planning a heist, except their crime was just wanting to hear music they couldn't afford. As the sun started to set and the concert time approached, they positioned themselves behind the pavilion. They could hear the sounds of the crew setting up inside, the murmur of the early arriving crowd. Their hearts pounded with anticipation and fear. "Okay," Larry whispered, "when that door opens again, we make a run for it. Stay low, move fast, don't look back." His friend took a deep breath. "What if we get caught?" "Then we get thrown out, but at least we tried." They waited. Minutes felt like hours. Their muscles tensed, ready to spring into action the moment the opportunity presented itself. Then they heard it, the sound of a car engine, getting closer. A limousine pulled up right behind them, black, sleek, completely out of place in this modest Florida town. The teenagers pressed themselves against the wall, trying to stay hidden. This wasn't part of the plan. Whoever was in that limo was important, probably someone who would call security if they saw two kids lurking behind the building. The door opened, and out stepped Elvis Presley himself.
Larry and his friends stood there, frozen. Of all the people who could have caught them, it had to be Elvis himself. Elvis looked at them, not with anger or suspicion, just curiosity. "What are you boys doing back here?" Elvis asked. Larry's mind raced. They could lie, make up some story about being lost or waiting for someone. But something about the way Elvis asked, casual, friendly, genuinely interested, made Larry tell the truth. "We're trying to figure out how to sneak into your concert, Mr. Presley. We really want to see you and Hank Snow perform, but we don't have any money for tickets." Elvis's expression didn't change. He didn't look shocked or offended. If anything, he looked understanding. "You don't have any money at all?" Elvis asked. "No, sir. We've been saving up for weeks, but it's not enough. The tickets are sold out anyway." Elvis nodded slowly. He stood there for a moment, just looking at these two desperate teenagers who wanted to see him perform so badly they were willing to break the rules. Then Elvis smiled, that famous crooked smile that would soon charm millions. "Follow me," Elvis said simply. "What?" Larry's friend asked. Sure, he'd heard wrong. "I said, follow me," Elvis repeated. He started walking toward the back entrance of the pavilion. Larry and his friend looked at each other in disbelief. Was Elvis Presley seriously inviting them to follow him? Was this really happening? They hurried after him. Elvis walked right up to the back door and opened it like he owned the place, which, in a sense, he did. He was the headliner. He could do whatever he wanted. The backstage area was busy with crew members, musicians, and venue staff rushing around making final preparations. A few people looked up when Elvis entered, then noticed the two scruffy teenagers following behind him. "Mr. Presley?" a venue manager approached. "Is everything okay? Who are these?" "They're with me," Elvis said casually. "Just some friends of mine." The manager looked skeptical, but didn't argue. You don't argue with the talent, especially when that talent is the reason everyone bought tickets in the first place. Elvis led the teenagers through the backstage area. Larry couldn't believe this was happening. They were inside. They were actually inside, and they weren't being thrown out. They were being escorted by Elvis Presley himself. "Where are we going?" Larry's friend whispered. "I don't know," Larry whispered back, "but just go with it." Elvis brought them to a spot in the wings, the side of the stage where the performers stood before going on. It was the best view in the house, better than any seat in the audience. "You boys can watch from here," Elvis said. "Nobody will bother you. Just stay out of the way when we're coming on and off stage." Larry stared at Elvis, unable to speak. They'd been hoping to sneak into the back of the auditorium, to stand in the shadows and catch glimpses of the show. Instead, Elvis had given them VIP access to watch from the wings. "Mr. Presley," Larry finally managed to say, "thank you. We can't believe—" Elvis put a hand on Larry's shoulder. "I know what it's like to be broke and desperate to see music. When I was growing up, I'd sneak into shows because my family couldn't afford tickets. I remember what that felt like. So when I saw you boys back there trying to figure out how to get in, I understood exactly what you were doing." You used to sneak into concerts too?" Larry's friend asked. "All the time. Got caught more often than I got away with it, but I never stopped trying. Music was everything to me, still is. I figured if you wanted to hear the show badly enough to risk getting in trouble, the least I could do was help you out."
From their spot in the wings, Larry and his friend watched the entire concert. Not just Elvis, but Hank Snow, too. They saw everything. The performers warming up, the nervous energy before going on stage, the transformation that happened when the spotlight hit. But the most incredible part was watching Elvis. From the wings, they could see both sides of him. The side the audience saw, confident, charismatic, electric, and the side backstage, humble, nervous, checking his hair one more time before going on. When Elvis finally walked out on that stage and started performing, Larry understood why everyone was talking about him. It wasn't just the voice or the songs, it was the way Elvis moved, the way he connected with the audience, the way he made everyone in that room feel like he was performing just for them. The teenagers watched in awe as Elvis sang, shook his legs, and drove the crowd wild. Girls screamed, parents looked scandalized, and Larry and his friend stood in the wings, grinning from ear to ear, knowing they were witnessing something special. During a break between songs, Elvis glanced over at them and winked. That simple gesture, acknowledging they were still there, making sure they were enjoying the show, meant
everything. After the performance, as the crowd filed out and the crew started breaking down equipment, Elvis came back off stage and found the teenagers still standing in the wings. "So, what'd you think?" Elvis asked. "That was incredible," Larry said. "Thank you so much for letting us watch." "You gonna be okay getting home?" Elvis asked. "Do you need a ride?" Larry shook his head. "No, sir, we can walk. We don't live too far." Elvis pulled out his wallet. Larry's eyes widened, thinking Elvis was about to give them money. But instead, Elvis pulled out 2 promotional photos of himself and signed them. "Here," Elvis said, handing them each a photo, "so you'll remember tonight." "We're never going to forget this," Larry's friend said. "Not ever." Elvis smiled. "Good. And listen, both of you, I don't know what you want to do with your lives, but whatever it is, don't let not having money stop you. I grew up poor, real poor. We didn't have anything, but I never let that stop me from going after what I wanted. You boys did the same thing tonight. You wanted to see the show, and you found a way. That's the kind of determination that gets you somewhere in life." Those words hit Larry harder than any song Elvis had sung that night.
Larry Silva and his friend left the Pavilion that night, walking on air. They couldn't believe what had just happened. They'd gone from trying to sneak into a concert to being personally escorted backstage by Elvis Presley himself. Over the years, they would tell this story hundreds of times, at parties, at family gatherings, to their own children and grandchildren. And every time they told it, the emotions would come flooding back. The desperation of being broke, the fear of getting caught, the kindness of a stranger who understood. In 2008, over 50 years after that night, Larry Silva shared his story with the village's Daily Sun newspaper. By then, he was an old man. Elvis had been gone for over 30 years. But the memory of that night was as vivid as if it had happened yesterday. "Our conversation was totally about being broke and yet wanting to see the show," Larry recalled in the interview. "So I guess he felt sorry for us and let us go in with him." But it wasn't just about feeling sorry for them. It was about recognition. Elvis saw himself in those 2 teenagers, saw the same hunger for music, the same willingness to take risks, the same refusal to let poverty stop them from experiencing something beautiful. That night shaped Larry's perspective on kindness and generosity. If Elvis Presley, who was already becoming famous, who had money and status and every reason to ignore 2 broke kids, could take the time to help them, then kindness wasn't about what you had. It was about who you chose to be. Larry never forgot Elvis's words about not letting money stop you from going after what you want. He carried that lesson throughout his life, passing it on to his own family. The signed photo Elvis gave him that night? Larry kept it for decades, not because it was valuable, though it certainly became valuable as Elvis's fame grew, but because it represented a moment when someone famous chose to be human, chose to remember where he came from, chose to help instead of judge. This story isn't unique. Elvis did things like this all the time. Throughout his career, countless people have similar stories about meeting Elvis and being shocked by his kindness, his humility, his generosity. He bought cars for strangers, paid medical bills for families in need, gave away money to people who were struggling. And yes, he let broke teenagers into concerts when he didn't have to. Why? Because Elvis never forgot what it was like to be poor. He grew up in Tupelo, Mississippi, in a 2-roomed shotgun shack with no running water. His family struggled constantly. His father went to prison when Elvis was young for forging a check because they needed money for food. His mother worked multiple jobs just to keep them afloat. Elvis knew what it felt like to want something desperately and not be able to afford it.
to stand outside looking in, to be the kid who didn't have what everyone else had. So when he became successful, when he suddenly had money and fame and power, he used it to help others in the situations he'd once been in. That night in Florida in 1955, Elvis saw two broke teenagers trying to sneak into his concert. He could have ignored them, could have let security handle it, could have walked right past them into the building. Instead, he stopped, asked what they were doing, listened to their answer, and then did something that would stick with them for the rest of their lives. He said, "Follow me." 2 words, 1 moment, a lifetime of gratitude. That's the Elvis Presley who changed lives. If this story touched your heart, subscribe and hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to remember that kindness changes everything. Have you ever been helped by someone's unexpected generosity? Let us know in the comments. Ring that bell for more true Elvis stories that prove greatness isn't about fame. It's about character.